2, 3, 1. Hello. Hello, everybody. If you could take a seat, we will shortly be starting. It's great to see you all in Glasgow. To see so many of you have made the early 9:30 shift. I'm very excited to see you all for what will be my last conference as conference convener. You can cheer. But I'm absolute pleasure to introduce the person who's going to introduce the conference and formally open the conference, our candidate, my good friend Daniel O'Malley, our candidate for Glasgow region, number 1 on the list.
Conference, it's a real honour to welcome you to Glasgow for this year's Scottish Liberal Democrat Conference. Not just as your lead candidate for the Glasgow region in next year's election, but as somebody who loves this city, understands its challenges, and believes deeply in our liberal values. Glasgow is a city of resilience and compassion, but it is also a city that has been let down by governments that talk a good game while our public services crumble, our infrastructure decays, and too many people are left behind. Next May, I'm standing to be an MSP for Glasgow because I've seen firsthand what happens when communities are ignored, when the housing crisis deepens, when mental health services are stretched to breaking point, and when transport across our country is left to rot. I'm standing because Glasgow needs a stronger, bolder, more energetic Liberal voice in Holyrood, and I believe I have the leadership, the track record, and the local roots to be that voice. We deserve better. Glasgow deserves better, and together we can deliver it. Throughout my career, I fought for practical change that improves people's lives. At Diabetes Scotland, I led the Diabetes Tech Can't Wait campaign, securing £8.8 million in national funding for life-changing treatment. Real money helping real people. At the Scottish Refugee Council, I've led national campaigns to challenge this UK government's cruel policies towards people seeking protection. I have done this by giving evidence at Westminster, standing up to far-right rhetoric, and defending the rights and dignity of people seeking protection. That's the kind of campaigning I'll bring to Holyrood, focused, determined, and rooted in compassion. I was raised in Glasgow. My grandfather was a draftsman on the Clyde. My parents grew up, married, and raised a family here. And it is where I met my soon-to-be wife. Glasgow's story is my story. As a community councillor in the Merchant City in Trongate, I fought to protect local heritage like the Ingram Street mural and create more green space in the heart of our city. For me, standing next year isn't just about party politics, it's personal. I want to fight for Glasgow, its people at Holyrood. Conference, we all know this truth. Scotland needs change, but not just any change, change with fairness at its heart. After nearly 20 years of SNP government, people are tired of division and decline. Our public services are on their knees, mental health waiting lists are spiralling, class sizes are growing, and across Scotland people feel forgotten. The Conservatives at Westminster crashed the economy and left families struggling to make ends meet. Labour promised change, but instead they've doubled down on the same cruel, unworkable policies towards people seeking protection in our country. While they fight each other, it's communities like ours that pay the price. But it doesn't have to be this way. The Scottish Liberal Democrats are showing that real change starts with fairness, with compassion, with competence, and with care. In Holyrood and Westminster, our party is standing up for carers, for patients, and for those left waiting for vital health care. In the Highlands, Jamie Stone, MP, and our hard-working candidate David Green are campaigning tirelessly to restore maternity services because no mother should have to travel over 100 miles just to give birth safely. And just outside this city in the west of Scotland, Susan Murray, Jamie Green and Adam Harley, our candidate for Strathkelvin and Bearsden, are standing up for better local transport, fairer education and stronger public services, showing what Scottish Liberal Democrat representatives deliver for their communities. Our message is clear. We can build a fairer, greener, more caring Scotland, a Scotland that works for everyone, not just those at the top. A Scotland where power is shared, where government listens, and where everyone gets the chance to thrive. That's the Scotland I believe in. That's the Scotland our party stands for. Conference, there's no better place to talk about change than here in Glasgow. A city defined by courage, compassion, and the determination to stand up for what is right. And that same spirit, the spirit of Glasgow, must now carry us across Scotland. Because in 2026, we have the chance to deliver change with fairness at its heart. From the borders to the Highlands, from the islands to our cities. Right across Scotland, and most importantly here in Glasgow, we can win that change because Liberal Democrats are winning again. The Scottish elections next May is an opportunity for change with fairness at its heart. Because Scotland deserves better, and with the Scottish Liberal Democrats, people can vote for it. A vote for the Scottish Liberal Democrats on your peach ballot will deliver a larger, stronger Liberal Democrat group in Holyrood, ready to fight for that change. Change that says people don't have to settle for decline. Change that restores fairness, community and integrity to our politics. And change that only the Scottish Liberal Democrats are ready to deliver. So let's take the energy of this conference and turn it into action. On the streets, on the doors and in every community across our nation. Let's campaign with optimism, let's campaign with fairness and let's campaign for the Scotland we know is possible.
Thank you. Before SC1, we will move to a procedural vote. The Conference Committee made the decision to introduce Emergency Business Motion 1 in place of Business Motion 1. The reason and explanation is contained within the motion, and it was because a simple administrative deadline had been missed. And so the Conference Committee decided to accept this motion. What we are now going to ask for a vote on is to allow additional time just a minute the explanation and then is to allow additional time for this to be debated. So the space that would otherwise have been allocated to Business Motion 1 will become the time that we will use to debate Emergency Business Motion 1. I understand there's a point of order.
Good morning, Conference. Procedural shenanigans at 20 to 10 on a Saturday morning. That's what makes this party great. Look, my problem with this vote is that this emergency business motion that we are being asked to allow time for was to have been an ordinary business motion until yesterday, at which point it was finally accepted by the Conference Committee that it hadn't been properly circulated, so it wasn't competent to have as a business motion. Now, our standing orders provide that the content of an emergency motion must be such that it could not have been submitted by the ordinary deadline. Now, the fact that you have made a mistake does not make that an emergency. So I am suggesting that we should not be allowing time to debate an emergency motion for something that is not an emergency, for something that doesn't actually have to be dealt with until at some point ahead of Federal Spring Conference, which would allow us to deal with this if we chose to in February of next year. So I'm asking you, Conference, through the only means that is available to me, that is to say, by a point of order, to reject the allocation of time for this emergency business motion, which, as I say, is not an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. In response, the Conference Committee did consider all of these points, but we are very aware that notice of this particular confirmatory ballot that forms part of a response to F10 has been known to the party since the Spring Federal Conference. There has been no fewer than 8 discussions on the Liberal Democrat Scotland page. There have been 4 Liberal Democrat voice. It's been discussed comprehensively at the executive level over the last few months, and it could be argued that through those various means and representatives in the executive, it is well known to the conference that today we would be debating this response. And the Federal Party has been awaiting our response in terms of a confirmatory ballot for 6 months. I could not, and the Conference Committee could not see the reason to delay this further and the arguments that it would serve, other than to put it in the hands of the members today to vote. And I believe the Conference Committee could not be persuaded of the arguments not to allow you the opportunity to come here and to vote on this, an opportunity that will be afforded to you later today. Yes? Okay, so it is in your bulletin. It's EBM1. Other than there are, Charles is passing you a copy. There are two elements that explain the reason why it's an emergency motion. Otherwise, Business Motion 1 is essentially the same as Emergency Business Motion 1. The vote we are going to take just now. Yes.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to make this point of order. I want to draw your attention to section E13 of the Constitution, which says the agenda shall be circulated to party members registered to attend that conference as soon as practical after publication, and in any event not less than 7 days before the conference. Now, I note the word circulate. The motion was certainly put on the party's website on Saturday, 6th September, a week ago, the 7 days before, but it wasn't circulated to members. The email drawing members' attention, drawing people registered to conference, drawing their attention to it, wasn't sent out until Tuesday. Now, this business motion is extremely important. And I mean, for members of conference only to become aware of it 4 days before conference instead of the 7 days that they're entitled to is against the Constitution, and it's an additional error in addition to the one that's in paragraph 6 of the emergency business motion. The clerical error there is one error, but this compounds it, and it's against the Constitution. Thank you.
Certainly, on the day before, it was an email sent to advise people the agenda will be published on the website, which is our normal place for circulating papers. Is there a further point of order? Jenny?
Thank you, Chair. Everyone's been aware of this, if you've been following it since spring. It did go up on the website over a week beforehand. This is really urgent and this is really important. It's entirely up to conference today whether you choose to do this today, or if we don't do it today, because you've all got it in front of you, we're going to have to bring it back as an online conference probably in about a month's time for this exact same motion. You've got it in front of you. We need to do it. And the urgent part is that the English party are going to be meeting in 2 weeks' time. If we pass it today, they're willing to pass it. Wales have already passed it. This has already been debated. Now, you are sovereign. You can make a decision today. Mea culpa, an accident happened. It was a clerical error, and we're really sorry about that. We're trying to find a way to correct it and move forward. So either we as conference can do this now, or I'm going to ask you to give up an evening in November in about a month's time, because we do need to do it, because we need to staff this, we need the resources, we need the people. And we can debate this later, and you can understand more about it, and I'm happy to talk to anyone. But I please ask you to be willing to discuss this today, and just understand that sometimes mistakes happen, and we're very sorry, and we're trying to find a procedural way through this. Thank you.
Okay. At this stage, I do believe that both sides have now been represented. And so if there are any further point of orders, they must be point of orders as opposed to putting those cases. I think that's been amply debated. What we will now move to is a vote to allow additional time by using the time allocated for Business Motion 1 to debate Emergency Business Motion 1. Can I see those in favour of allocating that time? Thank you. And can I see those opposed? Okay. I see that as being overwhelming, and so that time will be allocated. We now move to SC1, and I hand over the chair to Charles Dundas.
All right, thank you, conference. If you could take your seats, we will get started on SC1 policy motion. Islanders and rural communities deserve better. Ending the ferries fiasco. If I could ask you, please, if you're leaving the hall, to do so now, quickly and quietly, and for everyone else to look into this amazing debate. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to ask Jamie Green, MSP, to stand by to propose the motion, and Fraser Graham from South Edinburgh to be ready to come next. Jamie is, of course, our newest MSP within the Scottish Party, and hopefully we will hear from him. Oh, he's right here. He's right here. Go, Jamie, please, would you like to propose the motion?
Right. Just keep me right.
I will do. Jamie, you're our first speaker of the whole conference, so you're kind of a guinea pig. There are coloured lights at the back of the hall. They will be green while we want you to speak, yellow when we want you to be summing up, and red when we want you to shut up.
I can just stop now, actually.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Jamie.
8 minutes. 8 minutes, all right. Good morning, everybody. How you all doing at the back? Are you coming or going? Grab a seat if you're staying. If you're not, get out. Well, this has been a fun start, isn't it? I love the fact you actually have a proper debate. It's so democratic. It's marvellous. And I'm actually delighted that I'm opening the conference this morning. I know it's a Saturday morning. I know we're all a bit tired. But it is the weekend. We've got Alex Cole-Hamilton here sitting in row 2. Look how excited he is to hear my speech. And also, I'm actually really excited that we're talking about ferries. Do you remember the time when I brought up ferries at First Minister's Questions and Pete Wishart put out a tweet? Do you remember this tweet? I'll read it out. He said, ferries, 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 and then some more ferries. Oh, did I mention ferries? Every week. He was having a go at me because I was raising the issue of ferries every single week. And do you know what, Pete Wishart? I make no apologies for that. Because, conference, the utter disaster of our ferry network is a byproduct of this SNP government in Scotland. Scotland's islands are not some distant outposts of our country. They are real communities with schools and shops and families and businesses and livelihoods. And guess what they all rely on? One thing together: ferries. It's something that I live on the mainland I take for granted. I'm sure many of us do. But those of us who work and live and commute to our island communities will know that our islanders have been treated as second-class citizens by the SNP government. Those lifeline services, lifeline being the key word here, by the way, they've broken down. They've been cancelled. In the last 2 years alone, CalMac have cancelled over 10,000 sailings due to technical reasons. Not with the weather. I know the weather's grim sometimes. Technical reasons. 10,000 sailings have been cancelled in just 2 years. I represent the west coast of Scotland. I understand the problems. I've held the transport brief not once, but twice. I've visited these island communities. I've met the families that are affected by these problems. I've met the college students who've had their classes cancelled. I've met the tourist businesses who are on the brink, who are laying off staff. I've met people who are planning their lives around whether the ferry might or might not actually run that day. And all I can say to them is enough is enough. The time for talking has ended. Because we have a plan. We have a tangible plan to end the chaos on Scotland's ferry network once and for all. When I first raised this in Parliament some 10 years ago, the SNP government said, don't worry, the new vessels are coming. Of course they said that. Well, we're still waiting on them. We're still waiting on them. The patience has run out. My patience has run out, but islanders' patience has run out. Of course, the SNP also say, oh, we've invested hundreds of millions of pounds in new ferries. Well, of course you have. because it's 4 times over budget. If that's your measure of financial success, you spent 400 million on a ferry that cost 50, then we have a problem. Those ferries, by the way, were due in 2018. The Glen Rosa is still sitting there, about a mile from my house in Greenock, waiting to sail. The Glen Sannox is a beautiful ship, as Donald Trump would say, it's beautiful. But it's been in the repair yard twice since it launched already. Those ferries will cost £335 million. Let that sink in for a moment. The average age of our fleet is 24 years. The oldest ferry is 30 years. And yeah, there's a couple of vessels on their way, but guess where they're being built? Any guesses? Turkey, Poland. Goodness knows where the next ones will be built. China, Korea, who knows? But they're not building them in Scotland, are they? And for a government that says that they are stronger for Scotland, then where on earth is the investment in Scotland's shipbuilding industry? You couldn't make it up. They're building ferries that don't even fit the ports that they're designed to operate out of. The Glen Sannox is supposed to sail from Ardrossan to Arran. It doesn't even fit into Ardrossan Harbour. They said 10 years ago they were going to invest in Ardrossan Harbour, make it fit for purpose. They're still negotiating the purchase of it. This is about more than just ferries and ports. It's about a lack of strategy, a lack of direction, and a lack of listening to the people that actually know what they're talking about. Our islanders deserve better. CalMac crew deserves better. The workers at Ferguson Marine deserve better, which is why I launched a consultation on the future of Scotland's ferry network. A consultation not with the bureaucrats, not with the men in suits in Edinburgh, but with the people that I've spoken to over the years who've missed funerals because they can't get a ferry. The farmers who can't get their cattle to the mainland because there isn't a ferry. And their message was loud and clear in response to my consultation. They don't want excuses. They just want a plan. Well, guess what? I've got a plan. And that's what I'm here to move today. My motion will put an end to this ferry fiasco once and for all. What is our solution? Well, first of all, we're going to introduce a ferries bill. I'll do it. Whoever comes after me will do it. I don't care who the next government of Scotland is, but they must do this. They must introduce a ferries bill, because what that bill will do is put a statutory duty on ministers to deliver the vessels, to deliver the port infrastructure that we need. And when a ferry comes to the end of its operational life, they must replace it. Not a maybe, not a well, we'll think about it. Well, let's chat to somebody in Poland and see if they can build one. They must replace that vessel when it comes to the end of its shelf life. Not when ministers decide it's time, but when the vessel decides it's time, when the island community decides that it's time. Also, my ferries bill will enshrine in law that the government must produce a 30-year rolling strategy. Now, why 30 years? Why not 5? Because ferries are expensive. They're long-term investments. And that's going to cross governments. Not this government, the next one. It could be 4 or 5 governments away. We'll have to invest in our ferry network. And these are long-term decisions, the sort of decisions that built the MA, the sort of decisions that is the reason why Edinburgh Airport is the size that it is. These are infrastructure projects. The Queensferry Crossing, massive projects that require huge amounts of cash. I get that. And therefore, we need to take the politics out of this. We need to say that the government of the day, whoever it is, and one day it'll be us, but we must invest. Oh, that got a tiny bit of applause at the back. That woke you up. But they must do this. The second thing I also want to do with my motion today is we must end this tripartite arrangement between CMAL, CalMac and Transport Scotland. Because it's not working. We know it's not working. Look, I sat in the Rural Economy Committee some 8 years ago, and we did a big report into why it wasn't working. 8 years ago. And we're still waiting on the change needed to fix the problem. Everyone knows the system is broken, but no one is willing to fix it. We need to take the control of this away from incompetent ministers once and for all. Because I don't know how many ministers have we had, transport ministers, Ian? 10? 12? We've had numerous transport ministers who have no idea how to deliver this. Why? Because they're afraid to take that big view, that long-term vision on what Scotland's ferry network should look like. Someone's got to do that. And do you know what else needs to happen? Is those businesses, those islanders need to be compensated. Because...
Jamie, something else that needs to happen is
I need to
winding
stop.
up.
Oh, right. Well,
Thank you.
I'll conclude by saying we need to be brave about this. I'm keen to hear what the other speakers have to say, but it's about time that somebody steps up to the table and takes some decisions on this. And that's why my motion calls for a comprehensive review of our long-term ferry strategy. I hope it's one that you will get behind, and I hope it's one that you'll support today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie. And if Fraser Graham could be ready, and Christine Murdoch stand by. Fraser is on Conference Committee and will be our next MSP in Kirkcaldy.
I mean, something miraculous is going to happen for me to be our next MSP in Kirkcaldy, but I do love that it was only back in Inverness that Jamie joined us, and he's now already here proposing a motion to conference. And I must say, why did you not join us sooner? Because you're such a Lib Dem. I did hear apparently you went home early to avoid Glee Club at Federal Conference, but we'll have to get you there in spring, I think. Right, anyway. Ferries. No, the bit didn't land. Okay. So I don't live on an island. I live in Edinburgh. I work in Perth for an building surveying firm that does architecture. And a lot of the projects we do are out on the islands, particularly on the Isle of Mull. There's a wonderful farm shop called Glenforsa Farm Shop that we finished last year, is now open, and during the construction of that, they had problems getting things to the island. We had problems getting to the island to check on progress. On one occasion, my boss, having arrived at Oban for the ferry he was meant to get on, found out that that ferry no longer existed, and they did have a workaround to get into the Isle of Mull, which was to stick him on a small, rigid, inflatable boat for an hour to get to the island, and he had to get someone to pick him up at the other end. I've taken trips to Mull. The first time I went there, it was a day trip. So we drove from Perth, we took a very long drive out to Oban, an hour on the ferry, did what we needed to on the island, drove all the way back. It's now getting to the point where the ferries are so bad that that isn't possible for us. The last trip I took to Mull, I had to get the last ferry of the day because it was the only one that was still available. I had to stay overnight on Mull, so that was an extra cost for nights of accommodation from my business. It's then passed over to the customers. I then, to get home, had to go the long way round via Lachlan, Fishnish, Corran Ferry and back. My boss, who is still refusing to retire despite being almost in his 80s, on one occasion, to get back, couldn't even get the Lachlan Ferry, so had to go via Tobermory, that way, all the way back down through the Corran Ferry for about a 5.5-hour drive to get back to Perth. Now, I don't have to go to Mull that often, but if I've had to experience that much faff to get to Mull, then for the people living on the island, it's clearly not working, and something needs to be done. And I think what Jamie has proposed here is entirely sensible and a way to fix this. I maybe disagree with him on one point. Jamie's view is clearly that we should be building more of the ferries in Scotland. To be honest, I don't care where we build the ferries, as long as we have ferries that work, that fit the ports, and are fit for purpose. I don't really have much else to say, but I would say support this motion. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you, Fraser. And if Christine Murdoch from Dumbarton could come to the stand, and Neil Casey stand by. Christine is a member of the Ferries Community Board, so knows of which she speaks. Christine.
Thank you. I'm probably one of the newest members of the Ferries Community Board, which, if you don't know of its existence, is made up of various people who have an interest in ferries around Scotland. There are business owners, there are commuters, there's myself, a social user of a non-island ferry. I came here today on the Kilcreggan ferry, and if you ever fancy a day out doing the water, I can recommend that you get a train from Central down to Gourock, pop on the ferry and come and visit our wonderful community. Jamie, you don't have to do the train to Gourock, you can just jump on the ferry. You'll be welcome any time, and our friend Leo Dempster knows just what great fun you can have in Kilcreggan of a Saturday afternoon. I speak here as somebody who fought and fought and fought for our ferry. It can be done. Our ferry was a disgrace. It was run by SPT. They were not the problem. The problem was SPT ran one ferry. It was off more than it was on during the winter. We ended up saying, were they at a party last night? Because that's what we thought of the crew. Now our ferry is with Calmac. Not the best company in the world, but Calmac actually do have a duty of care to the communities they serve. You might not know that from the headlines, but they do have a duty of care to the communities they serve. Our ferry is now much more reliable, but it is not perfect. And on the Ferries Communities Board, I hear of stories that would break your heart, of less than a week's food left in supermarkets. In a developed country, that is disgusting and deplorable and fixable. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Christine. If Neil Casey could come to the stage and Alan Reid stand by. Neil is, of course, our convener of the Policy Committee who have brought forward this motion. Neil.
Thank you. Delighted to support this motion, and the Policy Committee were only too happy to sponsor it, because this motion goes to the heart of our liberal values of fairness, empowerment and accountability. It says that geography should never be a barrier to economic opportunity or social inclusion. And it recognises that the voices of island communities are not optional extras. They must be embedded in decision-making from the start and at the centre of everything involved with the ferries plan going forward. There will, of course, be challenges: budget pressure, engineering complexity, legal hurdles, but those aren't sufficient reasons for doing nothing. Doing nothing is not an option. We need to plan more intelligently, legislate deliberately, and ensure continuity and certainty rather than crisis management, because that seems to be how the SNP choose to deal with these matters. It's just putting out fires. There's no plan, there's no long-term thinking, and that's indicative of everything they've done in government over the last several decades, frankly. They've had one focus on independence, and everything else falls to rack and ruin as a result. By backing this motion, we're sending a clear message that the Scottish Liberal Democrats will not tolerate broken promises and broken ferries, and will deliver a more modern and resilient network that unites our island communities with the mainland in the way that they deserve. So I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. If Alan Reid could take the stage and Jamie Green prepare to summate. Alan needs no introduction as a former MP for Argyll and Bute and our current MSP candidate for Argyll and Bute.
Thank you, Chair. And I also thank the Policy Committee for bringing this motion forward following the mini-motion that we passed at Inverness. The lack of reliable ferries on the West Coast is an appalling scandal and entirely due to SNP incompetence. Island and peninsula communities have suffered enormously as a result. Ferries bring essential supplies, tourists, and are vital to all local businesses. Ferries have a useful lifespan of 30 years. A lot of the big ferries were built in the 1980s. So only an idiot would not understand that new ferries had to be in place by the mid-2010s. The SNP didn't understand this. I warned them in 2009, when I was the MP for Argyll and Bute, that they had to announce a plan then for new ferries, or breakdowns would be a regular occurrence. They attacked me then, said I was wrong, said that there was now in a great new Scotland, but surely even they must now realise that they were the ones who were wrong and the ones who caused this problem. This fiasco hasn't been caused by Transport Scotland, or by CMAL, or by Calmac, or by the workers at Ferguson's. It's entirely 100% the fault of the SNP for their failure to invest in ferries and port infrastructure. Mull, Iona, Tiree, Call, Colonsay, Isla, Jura, and the peninsula communities of Dunoon and Campbelltown have all suffered as a result of this fiasco. And then, to add insult to injury, the SNP's Business Resilience Fund only decided to help Colonsay. Good for Colonsay, but none of the other affected communities that I listed out, all of which suffered from cancelled ferries, none of them benefit from the SNP's Business Resilience Fund. That's a disgrace, and I certainly support that part of the motion that calls for the extension of the Business Resilience Fund. We need the fresh start this motion would provide, a rolling 30-year ferry and port infrastructure replacement strategy, a statutory duty to replace vessels and port infrastructure as required, empowering communities which rely on ferries and make them part of the decision-making process, restructure the governance arrangement for ports and ferries, and include community voices at the heart of the new structure, a new structure that will sit independently of government and with statutory powers. All this backed up by legislation so that no future government can, like the present SNP one, decide to save money at the expense of island and peninsula communities. I urge you to support this motion and give us a fresh start.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alan. And then finally, Jamie, would you like to summate on your motion? You have 4 minutes.
Can I first of all thank everyone who's stepped up to the platform to speak on this issue. I know many people are affected directly by this. I've said it at the beginning, but I want to repeat, this is about more than ferries and ports. It's about treating our islanders as equals in society. Can you imagine if the M8 had been shut for 2 years? Can you imagine the uproar and the outrage if people couldn't commute in and out of Glasgow every day? Well, that's what it feels like to be on an island in Scotland. It costs Arran £170,000 a day in lost revenue every time the ferry is cancelled. 170 grand a day. You multiply that across numerous islands and numerous communities. These islands rely on these. These are not called lifeline services for nothing. And as the other speakers have said, the SNP have made short-term sticking plaster decisions to what are long-term serious issues. CalMac, I agree, are not to blame in all of this. They're shuffling vessels around from one island to another. It's an endless game of moving. Somebody described it to me as the wheel of misfortune when it comes to moving ferries around, and they're absolutely right. Nobody knows this more than the people of South Uist, who held a crisis meeting recently to talk about the problems with the MV Lord of the Isles. In fact, I read an article in the New York Times by a journalist who'd gone to South Uist, and this is what he wrote. His headline was, "It's a stunning island, but good luck getting there." You know, that's really sad. And what sort of message does that tell the world about Scotland's amazing islands if you can't get there, you can't rely on getting off to catch your flight back to Boston, you know? What sort of message is that saying to islanders themselves about what their government thinks of them when they can't even connect them to basic public services? Let me recap what my motion seeks to do. 1, it will introduce a ferries bill within the first year of the next Scottish Parliament. So that work starts in May of next year. It sets in stone a duty on ministers to replace vessels and to upgrade ports. Secondly, it will give islanders a meaningful voice. Do you know they kicked the last islander off of the board of CMAL in the last couple of weeks? There are no islanders on the board of the body that builds ships and funds our maritime assets. Can you believe it? I am not making this up. It's like an episode of Yes, Minister, where Sir Humphrey goes to the Prime Minister and he says, "Oh yes, we've got the money, we just don't know what we're doing." And that's exactly what's happening at the moment. Our islanders are being ignored day in, day out, in the key decisions that are being made about their lives and their connectivity. My motion also says that we must sort out this tripartite mess between CMAL, CalMac and Transport Scotland. We must take these decisions out of the hands of incompetent ministers and give islanders a voice. We must expand the compensation scheme. It is outrageous that island communities were left out of the Business Resilience Fund. And finally, we must guarantee that our islands have the ferries and ports that are fit for purpose and that they deserve. I know that the Liberal Democrats offer something different. We're not just talking the talk on this, we have a plan. I believe that islanders must have a real say in vessel design, in routes and timetables. I know that we must unlock that potential that our island communities have. I've been fighting for this for a decade, as many other people in this room have. I know that they deserve better. I stand with our island communities, and I know you do too. I know that the SNP have failed them, and it's about time that somebody fixed this mess once and for all. And I believe right now, here on this grey Saturday morning in Glasgow, we can fix this mess. We can agree to put an end to decades of this fiasco. And it's about time we treated our islands with the respect that they deserve. So please support my motion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you everyone who spoke in the debate conference. Are you ready to vote on this matter now? It's very simple, no amendments. So could I ask everyone who is in favour of that motion to pass to raise their pass? Thank you. And is anyone against that motion? Absolutely nobody. Thank you very much indeed. And I will hand over now to Fraser Graham for SC2, the nighttime economy.
Sorry, conference, we'll be with you in just a moment. Thank you, conference. If I can ask anyone leaving the room to please do so quickly. Anyone staying, please stay. Can I ask Charles Dundas from North Edinburgh East and Leith to stand by to propose the amendment. And I now call Daniel O'Malley from Glasgow, who's on the Scottish Executive, to move the motion.
Conference, we all know this truth. Scotland comes alive at night. From the music spilling out of Suckyhall Street to the laughter in Leith, from the late night shift workers locking up restaurants to the artists setting up after hours gigs, our nighttime economy is a beating heart of culture, creativity and community. It employs over 137,000 people across Scotland. It generates 43.5 billion in economic activity. It makes our towns and cities not just places to work, but places to live, connect and thrive. But right now, that heart is under strain. In Glasgow, my home city, we've seen what happens when government and transport providers forget that not everyone's day ends at 5 o'clock. Last year, First Bus tried to scrap every single night service. Even after a deal to save some routes, major ones were lost, like the N2 through Finnieston and Partick, and the N6 to East Kilbride. Combine that with no Sunday subway services, and you've got thousands of people, bar staff, cleaners, DJs, bouncers, with no safe or affordable way home. It's not just inconvenient, it's unsafe, it's unfair, and it's economically short-sighted. Because when workers can't get home, venues can't stay open. When customers can't travel safely, they stop coming. When public transport fails at night, private cars and taxis fill the gap, undermining our climate goals and low-emission zones in the very centres they were meant to protect. A thriving nighttime economy must always be safe nighttime economies. When bars and clubs are understaffed and can't recruit security staff, patrons are put at risk. When women, trans and non-binary people don't feel safe taking buses home, they stay home. When disabled people tell Transport Scotland they don't feel secure travelling at night, they're effectively shut out from social life. That's not just a safety issue, that's an equality issue. If our cities are to be truly inclusive, they have to be inclusive after dark too. And that conference is what makes this a Liberal Democrat issue at heart. Because we believe in freedom, real freedom. The freedom to work when you choose, to socialise when you choose, to move safely and confidently through your city at any hour of the day or night. This motion is about fairness, opportunity and inclusion, values that sit at the very core of who we are as Liberal Democrats. So, Conference, we are calling on the Scottish Government in this motion to back Scotland's nighttime economy with seriousness that it deserves. Firstly, to create a dedicated minister for the nighttime economy, as other forward-thinking countries and nations and regions, like New South Wales, have done. Unlocking innovation through initiatives like Culture Up Late, which kept museums, galleries and music venues open longer, drawing new audiences and new energy into city centres. Secondly, to improve public safety with visible policing in antisocial behaviour hotspots, better links between venues and policing, and practical measures that make people feel protected, not policed. Thirdly, to make nighttime transport safe, reliable and accessible, because a night out shouldn't depend on whether you can get an affordable taxi home. Late night trains, trams and electrical buses must be a reality, not a rarity. And finally, to embrace innovation, exploring sustainable options for our city, where safety and connectivity can go hand in hand with technology. Conference, as the lead candidate for the Glasgow region in next year's Holyrood election, I want to take this right further. I want to take this fight further, because this motion isn't just a list of asks, it's a call for change in how we value the people who make our cities thrive after dark. If elected as Glasgow's next Liberal Democrat MSP, my focus will be on turning these ambitions in this motion into action, building partnership between local businesses, transport providers and councils, and ensuring that the voices of workers, small venues, are heard in Parliament, not just in passing. I want to see a Glasgow where staying out late doesn't mean taking a risk, where working late doesn't mean being forgotten, and where creativity and safety walk hand in hand. Because this isn't just about the nightlife, it's about livelihoods. It's about fairness for the people who keep our cities running while the rest of us sleep. It's about the freedom to live, work and move safely day and night in a Scotland that believes in opportunity for all. This is what makes our party different. Where others see nightlife as an afterthought, we see opportunity. Where others talk about safety as a restriction, we talk about safety as freedom. And where others accept decline in our city centres, we believe in renewal, in energy, in fairness and in hope. Conference, Scotland's nighttime economy isn't a side issue, it is vital to our nation's economy and cultural heart. An economy where culture thrives, workers are valued, streets are safe and no one is left stranded after the last train. A Scottish culture that is vibrant, fair and alive day and night. So let's be bold and let's be practical. Let's stand up for the people and places that make Scotland's nights shine. Because Liberal Democrats, Scotland's best ideas don't clock off when the lights go down. Conference, I move this motion.
Thank you, Daniel. Can I ask Eugene Clark to stand by? And I now call Charles Dundas from North Edinburgh East and Leith, who is the ward champion for the City Centre ward of Edinburgh, to move the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Conference, I'm pleased to move this amendment. Pleased because it's an amendment that has been submitted and supported by members councillors, candidates and local parties representing all 7 of Scotland's other cities: Aberdeen, Dundee, Dunfermline, Edinburgh, Inverness, Perth, Stirling. Our amendment very simply asks that while we're doing all we can to enhance and support Scotland's nighttime economy, we also remember the people who live in the heart of our cities. The nighttime economy brings life and energy to our urban centres. It has potential to be one of Scotland's greatest cultural and economic successes. But we want that success to be sustainable. It must go hand in hand with the comfort, safety and well-being of those who call our city centres home. Over the last 20 and 30 years, the way people go out has changed dramatically. The idea of everyone spilling out of a handful of pubs at closing time has given way to a much more diverse scene. Smaller venues, late-night cafes, live music, gallery openings, pop-up events. Many younger people are drinking less, choosing experiences that blend social life, culture, and well-being. It's a huge opportunity for our economy and our cities, but it also reminds us that the nighttime economy is not just about bars and clubs. It's about creating city centres that are not just alive, but that are livable. Our amendment adds that Scotland's city centres should support and protect diverse communities of residents. Safety should include not just patrons and workers, but residents too. A truly liberal vision for the nighttime economy is one where people of all ages and all backgrounds can live safely, sleep soundly, and walk home confidently through streets that feel welcoming and well cared for. Conference, if we want vibrant 24-hour city centres, we must think about those who are there at every hour. Not just the visitors, but the people who make these places communities. This amendment strengthens the motion. It doesn't dilute it. It makes sure that as we champion Scotland's nightlife, we also build cities that people are proud to live in. Please support the amendment.
Thank you, Charles. Can I ask Verity Woolley to stand by, and I now call Eugene Clark from North East and Central 5 to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by saying that I don't in any way disagree about the importance of the nighttime economy. My opposition to the motion is based on the fact that it's vague, it's bitty. Every element that's mentioned there, whether it's improving public safety, improving transport and so on and so forth, all these apply during the daytime as well. And my case would be that we need to have an overwhelming, overarching, thought-out transport strategy and transport policy, rather than focus on this one wee bit of the economy, or one big bit if you prefer. I speak with 8 years' bitter experience of leading the Leave Mouth Rail campaign, successfully as it turned out, and I learned 3 main things from that. One was not to trust politicians, the second was not to trust consultants, and the third was to not trust Transport Scotland, which is an organisation I feel is totally unfit for purpose. And the reason I came to those conclusions is that it became increasingly evident that transport in Scotland, public transport in Scotland, is a complete mess, because there is no overarching policy, there's no overarching strategy. So before we start looking at specific aspects of transport, such as mentioned in this proposal, I think we need to have an all-covering, proper transport policy. In my view, would include attention to rural provision, coordination of transport modes, proper real-time real-time timetables. I still have a note from Transport Scotland in 2008 promising real-time, up-to-date travel information at every bus stop in the land. Still waiting. And has to be connected to community needs. So, don't disagree with the importance of the nighttime economy, but I do think we have to sort out our approach to transport first before passing something as specific as this. Thank you.
Can I ask Jack Caldwell to stand by? And I now call Verity Woolley from Glasgow to speak for the amendment.
Hello, Conference. I'm here today to talk on behalf of the music community and how this sort of lack of nighttime transportation can affect those who actually more perform in the music community than those who come and attend. I myself have been a part of the Glasgow metal community for about 4 or 5 years now, which you might not be aware of is actually quite a thriving and diverse group within the city. But the biggest hurdle that a lot of the musicians have is there's not a lot of money in music. So even small changes to the way that transport works, how this can impact your ability to get to and from gigs, can dramatically affect your ability to actually host a gig or be able to attend an event. For example, in Glasgow, due to the fact that the tube on a Sunday shuts at 6 o'clock, functionally no one really does metal gigs on a Sunday night because it is basically impossible if you live around that route to get to and from a gig. So if you're only making maybe £100 or £200 a night running a gig, you're not going to spend the additional money on a taxi back home at the end of it, particularly if you've got, like my partner's band, 5 members. At that point, you've made negative money on running a gig. This sort of thing happens all the time within the city where things that aren't massive structural changes that need to be done, running more buses late at night, keeping the subway open a bit longer, running a few more trains later in the evening, would dramatically impact the ability for artists to be able to attend their own events that they are currently unable to get to and from. This impacts all kinds of different groups within the city. I have friends who work in the folk industry of Glasgow. I have friends who work in the opera industry of Glasgow. Every single group have said the same thing time and time again, where this sort of lack of ability to get to a gig when you're already such narrow margins of money that you're making dramatically impacts your ability to be able to run an event and be able to attend if somebody else is running. This is the reason why I have supported this motion and why I think it's personally a vital thing for us to try to be able to improve. Because if you can't have these artists running events, the events don't happen. So that impacts every other thing. That impacts local little gig venues who can't get acts to fill them and so end up having to not be able to run an event night. That impacts people who want to attend these events, and it impacts the surrounding areas who might be trying to sell other things to these sort of venues. This is a knock-on effect beyond just the individual events, but the whole industry as a whole. And again, music industry in almost all of the cities, from my experience of traveling around being part of metal in Scotland, is actually way more vibrant than you'd expect. There's so many people who want to attend these gigs, who want to be at them. But most events for these things don't start until 8, 9 p.m. and want to run until roughly into the early hours of the morning often, or at least until midnight, which in most of the cities is functionally impossible for a lot of people to get back from. So they don't attend and the artists can't get there. That is why I support this motion. I hope that you conference will as well.
Thank you, Verity. Can I ask Andy Williamson to stand by? And I now call Councillor Jack Caldwell from North Edinburgh and Leith to speak for the amendment as a whole.
Thank you, Conference. I'm here to support Charles Dandas's amendment, and I hope soon to be able to welcome him to the City Chambers as a Liberal Democrat councillor for Edinburgh City Centre ward. Although it's a short amendment, I think it's an incredibly important piece of wording in there. We need to recognise that Scotland's diverse makeup of neighbourhoods includes a lot of city centre areas that are incredibly densely populated, including my own ward of Leith Walk, which contains the most densely populated neighbourhood in the country. Part of that is finding a balance between residents' needs and the nighttime economy needs. Now, these two needs shouldn't be in opposition to each other, But until you've lived above a very loud venue and you're having issues with that, it's quite difficult to articulate the stress that that can cause. So I hope this amendment finds a way of ensuring that residents and businesses can work together to both maintain and enhance a safe nighttime economy for all. I think it's worth recognising that around 20 years ago, before the internet killed shopping centres came about because they left the high streets of the towns and cities that we represented. And in that place, people want experiences, people want restaurants, pubs, nightclubs, and that's great, and we really welcome that. However, part of that deal is that a lot of these venues open at a later hour and serve a very high population of people. In Edinburgh, I sit on the licensing subcommittee, and we've got a policy in which if a late hours catering licence is applied for, then in a tenement building with flats above it, then consent needs to be given by neighbours for that late hours catering licence to be granted. I think that's a fair compromise, and I think it has worked well in practice. So, goodness, I didn't know the green went more yellow as time went on. So, I suppose, in summary, we need to recognise that city centre locations do have lots of residents in there. A lot of residents who are renting, but a lot who own as well. And if we're going to enhance our nighttime economy and make it safer for visitors, we should also be doing the same for the residents in there. So I thank the mover of the motion, and I thank Charles for writing this amendment. I do genuinely believe it strengthens it and strikes a fair balance. Thank you very much, Conference.
Thank you, Jack. Can I ask Charles Dundas to stand by to summate on the amendment? I now call Andy Williamson for Edinburgh South to speak against the amendment.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I support this motion. I do not support the amendment. It's said that the definition of Puritanism is the fear that somebody somewhere might be having fun. I'm here to speak in defence of fun, which I think is an important aspect of policy making, which we often overlook. I think it's an important part of a subset of national happiness, of gross national happiness. I think that there's a tendency in policy making to tend towards legislation for legislation's sake. And incrementally, bit by bit, we chip away from this idea of fun and enjoyment and happiness. When I first moved to Scotland, we used to have happy hour. And nothing better symbolises this sort of legislationism, this dourness, than the removal of happy hour. You could travel across the border and have a great night out in Newcastle and enjoy happy hour there. You cannot do that in Scotland. An element of this, as somebody who enjoys the nighttime economy myself, and if we're throwing names into a hat for a nighttime economy czar, I'd like my name to be there, is that we have fixed licensing hours, so everybody empties out the pubs at the same time. If we were to liberalise those licensing hours, it would stagger the exit time from pubs, and it would reduce that emptying out onto the streets all at the same time. I live in Edinburgh, as Fraser said. We get noise complaints on Grassmarket. People complain about music being played in pubs on Grassmarket. Unless you moved to Grassmarket in the last, more than 900 years ago, that has always been a site of events and boisterousness and noise. That's what cities are for. That is what cities are about. They're about chaos. They're about noise. They're about people having fun and enjoyment. I grew up in a village which had no chaos or fun and enjoyment. So I chose to live in a city for that exact reason. So there's a danger with this amendment that we've created a little bit of a NIMBY charter. I think, as Jack said, there is already the situation in place whereby local residents can object to noise complaints or object to expanding of licensing. Every restriction we ever have is always born by necessity, but nobody stands up for fun. That's a really important point that I think we need to bear in mind. There's also a generational element to this. The nighttime economy is a big employer of young people. The people who complain about the noise are not the young people. We need to make sure, and when there's a cost of living crisis, that we're retaining employment for young people and making sure they can get access to jobs that they need. So we cannot allow our cities to become mausoleums. This is all done with the best intentions. Legislation always is. But I think we need to remember that cities are for fun, nighttime is for fun, and we should make sure to remember that we are liberals. And whatever people might say about us, we also are in favour of fun. Thank you very much.
Okay, can I now call Charles Dundas to summate on the amendment, and can I ask Rachel Park to stand by to summate on the motion as a whole?
Thank you. I was going to waive my right to summate, but as soon as somebody spoke out against the amendment, I felt I should respond. I'm in favour of fun. Don't let anyone tell you I'm not. And there is nothing in this amendment that clamps down on fun. There is nothing Puritan about listening to residents and trying to make our city centres livable, vibrant communities. Andy says he doesn't want to hollow out our city centres and make them mausoleums. That's exactly what I want. A city centre that is filled with people and families, and that also combines that with a nighttime economy, is the holy grail that we as Liberals should be campaigning for. So I'm afraid I completely disagree with Andy, who is surprisingly opposing my amendment, because I believe that what I'm proposing here does not discount the ability to have fun, but to have fun in a responsible way. It's about being cooperative and collaborative. It's like in this very room. We're having fun at our conference. There are people in the foyer having fun. All we need is for people to keep closing the doors behind them so that we can have our fun in here and they can have their fun out there. So that's it. Please vote for the amendment, and please keep closing the doors at the back of the conference as you go in and out.
Thank you, Charles, for stealing my line there. Can I now ask Rachel Park from Glasgow City to summate on the motion as a whole? Thank you. Oh, and Rachel is a first-time speaker.
Thank you. Yes, so please be nice. Conference, I first want to thank the speakers who have spoken in favour of this motion and the proposed amendment. We've heard some energising and optimistic words today on the topic of Scotland's nighttime economy. I first want to thank Daniel for moving the motion and for emphasising the issues of fairness, choice and freedom that underpin this motion and make supporting Scotland's nighttime economy an essentially liberal proposal. For us as Liberals, true freedom doesn't mean being technically able to work and socialise where and when you choose, but also feeling confident and safe in your choices when you take a late bus home or stay around later for the encore. That's why this motion includes the nighttime economy's most vulnerable patrons and workers at its heart. The proposed amendment to the motion recognises something great about our city centres too. They're not just exciting places to visit, but they're exciting places to live in. Excellent nightlife and nighttime opportunities are a selling point of our cities for current residents and for people moving to Scotland from afar. My husband and I love where we live in Glasgow, and one of the reasons we chose to settle in the city is the nighttime opportunities it offers. And when I'm not pregnant anymore, I will be right back out supporting our pubs and gig venues on our doorstep. Many of the residents of our city are students, young professionals, and people interested in the opportunities living in a city has to offer. And we often forget that residents includes renters, includes young people, includes those in student accommodation. I don't see residents' safety and opportunities as opposed to supporting Scotland's nighttime economy, and so I would support that amendment. The Glasgow City Liberal Democrats have put forward this motion in the knowledge that our local party, as is the case with Glasgow itself, is largely made up of young people, students and young professionals who are often the natural target of most late-night events and make up a large portion of late-night workers. Conference, I urge you to see this focus on the interests of young people as a good thing. Young people across the UK are having their freedom to live their lives restricted by stagnating wages and staggering rent. Now more than ever, the Liberal Democrats need to reach out to an increasingly disengaged demographic and empower young people to work in and enjoy their cities and the unique charm that the night has to offer the young. Fundamentally, I see this motion as bringing salience to an industry which has suffered terribly in the years following the pandemic, and an industry whose demise would deprive our cities and towns of much of their cultural importance and appeal. An overall transport strategy or overall cultural strategy often neglects and overlooks the nighttime economy by accident. A specific commitment to the nighttime economy by name serves as an important reminder that the people who operate outside of usual hours and seek opportunities at stranger times of night should not be sidelined and forgotten. Nighttime events also come with their own unique safety, profitability, and staffing issues. These are all aspects that make it necessary to address the nighttime economy directly. Scotland shouldn't be afraid of the nighttime. This country sees the shortest days in the UK, with Glasgow's winter solstice dipping below 7 hours of daylight and Shetland's dipping below 6 hours. We cannot avoid the dark here, and so we should embrace it and embrace the many thousands of workers, patrons, and visitors who make our nighttimes profitable, vibrant, and distinct. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who put in a card. I started with not enough cards and ended up with too many. Unfortunately, there was one last-minute card I simply did not have the time to call. So I'm now going to move to a vote. Can I ask, when you are voting, please be seated, and please make sure you're showing me the voting side of your pass when you raise it in the air. Can I ask for, first of all, votes for the amendment, please? So that's votes for the amendment. Okay, and votes against the amendment. Okay, the amendment is clearly carried. Can I now see votes for the motion as a whole as amended? Okay, and votes against the motion as a whole as amended? Okay, that motion is very clearly carried. Thank you, Conference. I'm now going to call somebody up to introduce our next speaker, and I believe the person I'm calling up is Christine Jardine, MP. Oh, and thank you very much to my aide and to my hall aide. Thank you.
Conference. This is one of those moments where I do wish I was taller. Can you all see me? I moved to Edinburgh in 2016, just after the elections, and went out on my very first canvassing session in the city, in Barnton. And there that night was Alex Cole-Hamilton, surprise, surprise, Kevin Lang, surprise, surprise again, and one other person, Sana Dykstra-Downey. And in the 8 years since I was elected, that's been a bit of a constant. Sana is always there, in one form or another, always helping, always campaigning, always working for the party. And she is now our spokesperson for Net Zero. She's a city councillor who topped the poll ahead of Labour's then leader of the council in the last elections. In her professional life, she raises money for charities that provide educational opportunities and has helped establish an ocean protection initiative. I mention that because apparently every time we mention Sana and oceans, it winds Kevin up. So, but something, if you follow Sana on Twitter or social media, you will know that there's not a community centre, an AGM, a community garden that she hasn't been to. She is a yes and person who, if she becomes the MSP, which I hope she will, for Northern in the next election, she will serve her constituents there with a commitment and determination that we already know from how she serves her constituents as a councillor. And it's something I think we should all aspire to and replicate. Last year, I had the pleasure of having lunch in Westminster with Sana and her mum, who was over. And I learned that sunny disposition, that commitment to liberal ideas is something I think she probably picked up from her mum. And it's something that she takes into everything she does. And when she is the MSP for Edinburgh Northern, as I am absolutely convinced she will be, I know that she will take it to Holyrood. But now she's going to bring it to the stage for all of us. So please, can you welcome the next MSP for Edinburgh Northern, Sana Dykstra-Downey.
Thank you, Christine. Conference, it is a huge honour to stand here today as your candidate for Edinburgh Northern and the regional list. I'm so grateful to the local members who put their trust in me and to everyone who's helped my campaign so far since the beginning of the year and to everybody who will be doing so in the coming months. I have to say, some days this all still feels a little bit unreal and things could have been very different. Because the very first time I stood as a political candidate was, well, based on a bit of an embarrassing misunderstanding. You see, 18 years ago, I was a very young volunteer organiser helping to get a council candidate elected in the 4th ward, as in Firth of Forth. Let's call her Elaine. Elaine had a pretty cool email address, Elaine 4 Forth, with the 4, number 4. And at the time, I was still quite new to politics in this country. I didn't yet speak Lib Dem. And I thought the 4 stood for working for or campaigning for. So I created my own email address, Sanne for Forth. I was quite pleased with it. Elaine must have been a little bit confused, but to her credit, she rolled with it. I was puzzled, though, that she started to introduce me as the second candidate for Forth next time round. I would laugh nervously. No way was I doing that. I shuddered at the thought of the idea of my face on a leaflet. I was terrified of public speaking. I cared deeply about my local area, sure, but I did not think I was candidate material. But when a by-election was called in that same ward the next year, everyone looked at me. And I looked back at them. Were they actually serious? Where could they have possibly got the idea that this is something that I wanted to do? It was only years later that the penny dropped. Very embarrassing. But I did stand, and even though I was still terrified, and we didn't win, not then, it didn't help that 2 weeks before polling day, half my campaign team got on a plane to help Barack Obama get elected instead. Do you know what they did? They left me with a big envelope. A big envelope that I was only to open if all else failed. If I was really down, there was a message in it to get me through. And you know what that caring, encouraging message said? It said, deliver more leaflets. I'm not kidding. It's a miracle Kevin Lang and I are still friends. Conference, we must deliver more leaflets because it's how we will win in Edinburgh Northern next May and in many other places around the country. I care deeply about the direction of politics in this country, the country which has been my home for all of my adult life. And I don't like what I see. On the one hand, we have a tired SNP, out of puff and out of ideas, except at election time. After 18 years of SNP government, John Swinney says he's just getting started. Give me a break. And on the other hand, we have the rise of Reform and Farage. And I don't know about you, but I'm enormously proud of the way Ed Davey and our MPs in Westminster are the ones holding Reform to account. While Labour and Conservatives are pandering to Reform, Liberal Democrats are standing up to their divisive, intolerant, anti-Europe and anti-net zero rhetoric. Instead, we are focusing on improving people's lives in our communities, on tackling the crisis in the NHS, in our care system, and on addressing the biggest crisis society has ever faced, that of climate and environmental change. I will never forget the first time I watched Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, back in 2007. His was one of the first mainstream voices warning about the devastating effects of global warming. In that film, I saw the country of my birth, the Netherlands, disappear under rising sea levels. That image, that clip, had a profound impact on me, and it made me consider what actions I could take, what influence I had to make a difference. First, I made some changes in my own life. Swapped our diesel for an early electric car with a tiny range. Insulated our home top to bottom. Installed a heat pump and disconnected from gas. Before I was elected to council, I raised money for climate change research and helped establish a fantastic international ocean leadership program led out of the University of Edinburgh, which supports people all around the world making a difference to the health of the oceans, which in itself is hugely important for the fight against climate change. What else can I do? I thought. So I set up a sustainability team at work, which looked at our processes from waste to recycling, from commuting to procurement, winning us a sustainability award the next year. And in my own community, I worked very closely with local campaigners for Wardy Bay and more recently the Save the Roseburn Path campaign to protect vital green spaces from pollution and even destruction. Since my election to council, I've advocated for safer cycling and walking, especially around schools. and have successfully argued for more money in our council budgets for our climate and low carbon heat networks teams. And if I am elected to the Scottish Parliament next year, I will be a champion for real, practical action on climate and environment there too. As Liberal Democrats, we are known for getting stuff done. Well, let me tell you, the time to get stuff done on climate is now. We have practical, excellent policies on a national insulation programme, on planning renewables alongside nature, and on decoupling electricity prices from gas. Policies that will reduce emissions and save money on bills. 2 weeks ago, I visited Edinburgh College in the new Northern constituency together with Ed Davey. We met with apprentices and saw for ourselves how they're trained to install solar panels and heat pumps. Staff told us that there is a huge demand for spaces on these courses, but that they simply don't have the funding to meet that demand. If we are serious about the transition to a truly low-carbon economy, then we must make sure that the skills are there to support it. This is why Lib Dems will work with education providers and industry to meet that challenge. Because the challenge of climate and environmental change cannot be the preserve of one party or one movement to solve. Reducing our emissions, meeting net zero, and tackling the biodiversity crisis must be goals that are shared across all political parties. And while the SNP have talked a fair game, their government has consistently failed to meet their own emissions reduction targets. But we cannot give up on achieving net zero emissions. There is no other silver bullet, no technology that will magically save us from doing the hard work, and our party can provide leadership on that, even if that sometimes means making difficult decisions. We have the track record of working with our communities, and I believe that we can bring our communities with us on this journey by making it easier and more affordable for people to make sustainable choices. We owe it to the next generation, many of whom feel deeply failed by the people in power. I want to be able to look my own children in the eye and say that I did what I could to leave this planet a slightly better place. My children. My long-suffering Lib Dem children. I know that many of you in this room will have children that have been dragged to local party AGMs, that have patiently tolerated a steady stream of strangers in their house for action days, that have been asked to deliver focus leaflets for ice cream. My kids mean the world to me. And when one of them was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 6, that world turned on its head in an instant. For one long roller coaster year, we became intimately familiar with all that is good and not so good about the Scottish NHS. Now, I want to be clear. I have no reason to doubt the excellence of the medical treatments that my daughter received on the NHS and that ultimately led her to being well now, or the commitment of the doctors and nurses to the well-being of their patients. What we did see, though, was a system that is under immense pressure, with cost cuttings being obvious everywhere. It sometimes showed itself in really small things, like how there were never enough pillows for parents staying over on the ward. The food for the kids was often such poor quality that we still laugh about the thick chunk of bread with a hint of tomato paste that they called pizza. There are still other examples that have stayed with me, but that I find hard to talk about to this day. Every little extra, like a cup of tea or a biscuit, for exhausted parents was provided by charities, not the NHS. And yet, we found that the entire system of care for children in hospital, the feeding, the washing, the toileting, sometimes even keeping track of medication, relied heavily on parents. I expect many were struggling with their own mental health or even physical health, but no one talked about that. We were simply expected to get on with it. No doubt this is a familiar story for many people who care for loved ones and something that needs addressing society-wide. Meanwhile, on our ward, nurses were either run off their feet or spending seemingly endless time inputting data into antiquated computer systems. There never seemed to be enough of them. Sadly, problems with staffing are no means confined to paediatric cancer care. In June of this year, the Royal College of Radiologists reported that Scotland has a 25% shortage of radiologists and a 90% shortage of oncologists. They described the situation as a ticking time bomb. We all know how important early diagnosis is to outcomes, and yet the SNP has failed to meet their own cancer waiting time targets in over a decade. And while they say that they are recruiting more medical staff, the real problems lie not just in recruitment, but also very much in retention of staff, from radiologists to GPs. And as Liberal Democrats, we understand how important it is to have access to primary care in our own communities. Having to wait weeks for a GP appointment simply isn't good enough. If I get elected as MSP for Edinburgh Northern, I will continue to put pressure on the Scottish Government to fund our GPs properly, to fund our NHS properly, so that our residents can access the care that they need and deserve, because Scotland deserves better. So, conference, if between now and May you find yourself in Edinburgh, come and give us a hand. Come and knock on some doors, come deliver some leaflets, or if you're able, help us fund our campaign by making a donation. Conference, I'm not terrified anymore. I am determined, I am ready, and with your help, we will win in Edinburgh Northern next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. We now have an important presentation, and I'd like to welcome to the platform to give that presentation Councillor Claire McLaren.
Conference, good morning. Can I just check Willie Wilson is in the room? Where is he? Oh, I see him lurking at the back there. So this is quite an honour to be standing here giving this speech. So after 8 years, Willie Wilson has decided not to seek re-election as president of the Liberal Democrats. I've heard him say, you know, he applied, and this is probably 6 years longer than he meant to be here. And I think he's saying that in jest. I know he's truly enjoyed his time as president. So Willie took on the role with his usual dedication that he has and does with the many other roles that he holds. His 42 years as a local councillor being the best example I can think of where he became a significant community figure in true Liberal fashion. I do know that Willie has been secretly immensely proud to have served as president of the party. We're proud to have had him as the president, and through these difficult times of COVID, changing times, and we are now winning again. So, Willie, I'm sure you're very chuffed that the party's now moving forward at great pace. So, over the last few days, I've been asking many of you for your thoughts and words to describe Willie. Quite a combination of words. But, you know, there's been a theme throughout this. Loyalty, top of the list. Supportive, kind, listens, always finds time, and he does, despite all his personal commitments of caring and in the background. Willie is persuasive in a good way, assertive. He makes us all feel mattered, was another comment made. Another one, a rare gift of being able to connect with people. And this one I laugh at. known by all, loved by most. So I'm sure we can all relate to that. So somebody else said, when you think of Willie Wilson, you smile. Never misses an opportunity to congratulate. He's always supportive. Now, we see that on Facebook. All the Facebook posts at the moment of all of us canvassing, you know, almost one of the first likes is from Willie Wilson, followed by a quick comment. And even that in itself keeps you buoyed up. I first met Willie Wilson about, 5, 6 years ago. I've not known him for long. Heard about him, knew about him, read about him in the press locally in Perth and Kinross. And Willie and I first met, I think it was probably on Teams, because that was lockdown at the last Scottish elections. I was a helper for my extremely good friend who stood as a candidate, only meaning to help. But goodness me, here I am standing here. I've stood as a candidate in a general election, about to stand as a candidate in the Scottish elections. I've become member of many committees on the party. It's all due to Willie Wilson, his persistence. What Willie maybe has learned from Claire or picked up from Claire is an appreciation of farm roads. When I first joined, Willie said, we didn't get up those farm roads. Well, we do now, because there's votes in them roads. Willie is now even reading the farming press, so I like to think that I've maybe left a mark on Willie. But, you know, Willie departing this post, it's big boots to fill for whoever's coming in behind you. You know, a chance for the next generation to come along. Willie has I've heard Willie say that he's got 3 loves in life. That's after Margaret and his boys. Those 3 loves are the church, Dundee University, and the Liberal Party. Goodness me, Willie has served us, given remarkably a fitting proportion of his time, talents, and probably money to the party in a way that he probably does to the others. Willie, there's not, you know, words can't just sum it up easily. The legacy that you're leaving, it's immense. Not only the shorts on the campaign trail. There was one of our MSPs asked for how do you remember, how would you sum up Willie? Shorts. Yes, but the legacy that you're leaving is immense. Not only at local level, but here in the party. So all I can say, Willie, on behalf of all of us, it's with great pleasure and thank you immensely. Conference.
Thank you, Claire. I've been given a short opportunity to reply, but the conference convener said, make it short. It's been a blast being the president. First of all, I rewrote the job description because it just said, the first iteration of it, you chair the appeals panel, or you convene the appeals panel. Well, that's when there's not so good news. I've spent more time in the last 8 years doing a lot of things, but a lot of the time has been to prevent having appeals panels, to try and mitigate problems, negotiate, arbitrate, and resolve things without having an appeal. Because if an appeal, there's a winner and a loser. And sometimes, if you sit down and chat to folk, you can achieve something that's better than that. So, it's been super to travel all over Scotland, from Kirkwall to Kelso. Islay to Inverness, Shetland to the Scottish borders. It's taken me to the Northern Isles. It's taken me as far south as the Scottish borders and beyond. It's taken me to Paddy Ashdown's memorial service in Westminster Abbey. It's taken me to a whole host of different occasions. But I don't want to go over all of that because there isn't time. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I've felt it's been an honour and a privilege to represent the party on many different occasions. But I just want to highlight 3 of these. One of them is the best put down ever over the 8 years. This was in Kelso when I was speaking to the local party. And I said to them, we were discussing ram sales, racing and rugby. Now, I now know, thanks to Claire McLaren, more about ram sales than I did before. And I know a wee bit about horse racing, because Margaret watches it regularly on the telly. I haven't given her the bookie's number yet, which is maybe a good idea. But when we came to rugby, I said, I don't really understand what makes 11 men run about in the freezing cold pitch in the middle of winter. And Alec Neil, our famous border councillor, said, Willie, just shows your ignorance. There's a bit more than 11 men on the field in each team. And I realised then I'd said the wrong number. I think one of the most poignant moments, but one of the most funniest moments, was at Mima Carmichael's funeral in Port Ellen in Islay. Alan Reid was with me, as many others. And I've never laughed, and I've never cried so much at a funeral service. Alistair and Mima's grandson gave tributes that were beyond measure and beyond repetition, but were so poignant and yet so funny that I had a tear-stained hanky at the end of it, and it was an honour to be there to represent the Scottish Party on that occasion. And my third experience happened on Wednesday, and there will be a full tribute to Ming, but I want to make a personal tribute to him right now. It's one of the saddest occasions I was on. I did warn Ian Smith that I would cry, and I did. But it was a privilege to say goodbye to that great man and see him laid to rest in a lovely place at his wish to be next door to his wife. Thank you all for your support. Thank you all for your patience. Thank particularly Willie Rennie and Alec Cole-Hamilton for their unwavering support, even when they didn't agree with me some of the time. That's been much appreciated. I'm retiring as the president, but I'm not retiring from the party, and I still aim to be around for as long as the Lord allows me to. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. I now pass the chair to Neil Casey for the start of our mini-motion session.
Okay, if everyone that wants to take part in the mini-motion session can come into the hall and take their seats, we'll begin in a minute or so. I'm going to quickly run over the process in case this is your first time taking part in a mini-motion session. The purpose of this is to be a lot less formal than the standard debates, so you don't need to fill out a speaker's card. We have 2 mini-motions to discuss this morning, which are in your bulletin, and we'll take them in order. We'll have both debates and discussions, and then we'll do the votes for both at the end. Each proposer of the mini-motions will have a maximum of 3 minutes, and then anyone that wants to speak in the debate, you don't need to come up here, you don't need to fill out a speaker card, you just need to raise your hand, and one of our glamorous assistants will find you with a microphone, and you will have a maximum of 90 seconds, so a minute and a half, to make your point on the mini-motion. And we'll then have indicative votes. They're not binding. They will simply indicate whether conference is broadly in favour or against the particular mini-motion. And will then, if conference is in favour, it will get passed to the policy committee for further consideration, discussion and research. And obviously the timing is apt because we are in the midst of preparing the manifesto for May next year. The outcome could then be working with the mover on a full motion, could be subjecting the mini-motion to further research, as I say, deciding the idea should go through federal conference if that's more appropriate, or deciding that the mini-motion should not be progressed further for whatever reason. So the outcome today simply passes it to policy committee, where we will consider things a bit further. Normally we'll write out to you, or we'll get in touch with the proposer and those that spoke in the debate shortly after conference in order to discuss what we think should happen next. So with that in mind, I will call the first mini-motion, coordinating road and pavement resurfacing and utility works, submitted by Fraser Graham. Fraser, there you are. Yes, do you want to propose your mini-motion, please? You've got 3 minutes.
Do I want to? That's a question. Sorry, I thought I'd use the ramp because nobody else has yet. So I will admit this mini-motion is maybe a little bit pie in the sky. Maybe a bit ambitious, and it may or may not be rubbish, but I'll leave everyone else to contribute to see what you think on it. So this is a thought that's occurred to me quite a while back, and I've never really thought to put it into words or into emotion, and I thought actually mini-motion's a great way to do this. You see all the time road and pavement replacement schemes, where it's a fairly involved process. You know, you come along, they scrape the old surface up, they spend a bit of time working on the sub-base to get it all nice and level, and they spend a lot of time putting the surface back down again, and it ends up all lovely and neat and clean. And then about 3 weeks later, somebody from Scottish Water or Scottish Power or Virgin Media goes, oh, hang on a minute, there's a pipe or a cable down there, and we need to do something to replace it or connect into it or change something on it. So they go and cut a lovely big strip in that newly, freshly laid piece of road, do their work, and then stick down a patch job that ends up with a trip hazard, an unsightly blemish upon what was a very nice, clean road surface that the council spent a lot of money that most councils don't have these days to put down. And so I just wondered, is there a better way to do this? Is there a more logical way where councils should be able to say to these utility companies, hey, we're about to rip up the road surface of this road or rip up the pavement surface of this pavement. Do you guys have any utilities in there that you need to make changes to or do upgrades to at the moment? Because if so, we'll lift the surface, we'll give you guys the opportunity to do whatever you need to do, and we'll put it back down again, and then you won't have to touch it for hopefully the not too distant future. You know, that's kind of what my intent is here, of basically forcing utility companies to do the works when the road surface is already up, And then once you put it down, if the utility companies suddenly go, oh, oops, we forgot that we need to do something there, you say, well, you had your chance. Now, if you're cutting into that surface, you've got to reinstate it fully, not just a patch job. You've got to take the full width of the surface and make it good. Because a lot of the potholes, a lot of the trip hazards in our pavements that make them really inaccessible for quite a lot of people are due to these patch jobs failing because they are a weak point. There's also an extra bit I put in here which is to do with better defining what an emergency is when it comes to utility repairs. Oh goodness, have you already put me on red? Am I already at 3 minutes?
Yes, your 3 minutes are up, so if you could draw
Oh,
your
sorry.
remarks to a close, please.
Not paying attention. Basically, they get away with saying anything's an emergency when really it's a failure in maintenance, and we need to hold them to a better standard and say, no, it should only be an emergency when it's actually an emergency, and if you fail to maintain it, you should be paying extra and getting it done properly. That's my point on that. Thank you, Conference.
A quick 3 minutes. Okay, so if you want to speak on this, if you could raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. If you can keep the interventions brief, as I say, you get maximum 90 seconds. But if you could start by saying your name, that would be helpful just for the purposes of our note-taking. Thank you. Put your hands up nice and high so we can see you, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Scott Simpson, Eastern Bartonshire. I think it's time that we introduce some artificial intelligence to this conference. So with that in view, I've just done a Google search and I've obtained the following AI overview, AI overview. It says here, based on recent news reports, there is no public information linking a Neil Casey to the Liberal Democrats. Searches identify other individuals named Casey associated with different political parties and issues, but no one by that name appears to be a prominent figure in the Liberal Democrats.
That was on point, thank you. There's one up the back there. And then we've got here and here.
Marion Ewanson, I'm a councillor in Aberdeenshire. I'm not quite sure where Fraser's got his ideas from, but there is already a process. Utility companies can't just go and dig up the road. They have permission through the council. You can see it online. There's actually a plan for everything that's going to be happening. There are exceptions for emergencies, but it has to be programmed like that because you can't have 2 or 3 sets of roadworks going on at the same time. And companies like Openreach, when they're doing their cabling at the moment for all the fibre, they can't do the bit half a mile down the road to suit the council's tarring programme because the bit that connects it further up the road isn't down yet. So I see no sense in this motion at all. Sorry, Fraser.
Thank you. And then I think there was a hand here, and then we'll come to Jackie down here.
Councillor Robert Brown, I chair the Communities Enterprise Committee of South Lanarkshire Council. There's a thing called the Roads Register, which I think has really been touched on over there, which is supposed to govern these things. Frankly, it doesn't work very well. And I think Fraser's point behind this is quite a valid one. There are improvements that are possible in this particular realm. Behind it, I think I'd like to make a couple of points I've made. There's the issue of the capital programmes of the Water Board, of the utility companies, of the councils and others that get involved in this. They don't actually align with each other. That's one of the difficulties. They all do things at different times. In South Lanarkshire, we're taking forward as part of the administration, which Liberal Democrats are part of, safe routes for communities. And the general idea of that is to try and improve road junctions to make them safer and to deal with all the things along the line of that particular important road that actually cause pedestrians problems. We can do an awful lot better in this realm. This motion, I think, is worthy of taking forward, looking at the practical realities and trying to make the thing a bit better. One final point, if I may, which is to do with buses. First Bus tell me that they require to put on 1/3 additional buses with all the costs that go with that because of roadworks and other delays on the network. If the thing worked more smoothly, they wouldn't require to do that. We'd be able to invest in better bus services. That's one of the side products of getting this particular thing right. Thanks very much indeed.
Thanks, Robert. And then Jackie had her hand up, and then were there any other hand up? One here, and then here, and our esteemed President.
Jackie Bell, East Lothian. The road situation here in Scotland is indicative of lack of spending by the SNP, that the pavements between my hotel, which is like 9 minutes walk, and this hotel is a focus deliverer's dream, lots of photo opportunities. As Fraser has pointed out, that there is a lack of coordination. There are websites out there like the Roadworks Commissioner. Councils are meant to tell community councils what is happening and keep us informed. But there is still a lack of coordination. Remember the songs, like it was on the Monday morning, the gasman came to call, and there's another big hole in the road. One hole can lead to another. Recently we had a pavement widening. They burst the gas pipe. The gas men burst the water main, and the road was closed for 3 weeks. As Robert said, it can lead to delays with buses, all sorts of other problems. Therefore, I really agree. I think that Fraser has a point, and that this is a valuable motion to take forward.
Thank you, Jackie. So there are 3 hands, the lady in blue here, and then Thomas, and then Willie, and then we'll wrap up this mini motion. Okay, one more after that.
Thank you. I'm Moira Forrest. I was an Edinburgh councillor and gave up that role 22 years ago. But I would refer Fraser back in history to something called Susie Phone, which brought together utilities, council services, etc. And as the councillor from Aberdeen, there is much in current legislation. I'm not au fait with it, but I remember going through cable laying, a new technology at that time, where reinstatement of roads and pavements were vitally important to many people, not least people with mobility issues. And we all know what happens when utilities are down. But currently, more people are concerned with the internet being down. And I think that's where perhaps media attention could be diverted to some of the other day-to-day things that we need in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, then Willie, and then there's a gentleman up there, and then that'll be that for this debate. Thanks.
Thomas Prague, Highland. I was a councillor on Highland Council for 10 years. There is a lot in it, but I fear it's a bit overkill, Fraser. Nice try, but I fear this would actually create more bureaucracy and slow things down, which is the last thing we want. But what we might do is encourage the best practice, which does happen. There are councils and utilities who do coordinate quite well. Certainly when a bit of major work is being done, I do remember it being coordinated brilliantly, and they all got on with their bits at the same time, doing some serious work. I think the other issue here is communication. Councils and utilities need to communicate better with the people affected so that they understand why it's happening. We kind of understand why the holes are being done for the fibre at the moment in many places. People have kind of grasped that. Very often you don't know why, and it does look ridiculous. Lastly, it's of course meat and drink for our campaigners in local council elections coming eventually, so we might want to brush up our policy a bit.
Thanks, Thomas. Willie, and then the gentleman at the back.
Thanks very much. You've heard enough from me already today, probably, but just to say a couple of things following on from what Moira said about mobility issues. As most of you know, my wife's got MS and she's got to use a wheelchair. I came from Buchanan Street bus station today here, and it walked it in 15 minutes. If I'd had the wheelchair, it would have taken me at least half an hour, because the number of pavement difficulties that you enhance. And I'm not just talking about wheelchairs, I'm talking about electric scooters and every other mobility aid, because then there's an increasing number of folk now use mobility aids, which is great, because folk who were previously stuck in the house can get out and about and have a degree of independence. And that's really, really important for the mental health well-being. But if the pavements and roads are potholed, it makes that much more difficult. Glasgow got nipwa this morning from me doing that survey, and Edinburgh, once you go off some of the main drags, is not terribly far behind. The only difference, Edinburgh has got so much grass growing up in the curbs these days that you could almost graze rabbits off it. But I think there's a really important issue that resonates. First of all, I'm grateful for Fraser bringing this to the conference floor, because it's a great campaigning issue, because people understand pavements, roads and potholes. And sometimes we've maybe got slightly more esoteric subjects that we talk about.
Can you draw your remarks to a close,
sure.
Willie? Thanks.
Support the idea. Thomas is right. Brush it up a bit, bring it back, and let's have a campaign on this leading up local elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. And then the gentleman at the back, and then we'll move on to our next mini-motion. Thanks.
I live in Dunblane, and we are victims of this and have been for about the last 18 months. And I think, although the councillors say there is a procedure, then it has to be the council that are in charge of this. Now, we all knew broadband was going in. We didn't know there was new streetlights going in, just on the same pavement. But across from us, we're at a junction with a primary school. And the council, about 4 months ago, relaid the pavement, put in the new border to the road, to the pavement. Beautiful. And the residents are still waiting for the broadband on their street to go in. Now, the council are responsible and should have just waited until everything else was done. That would be the point I'd make.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to wrap up this debate and ask Fraser to come back up to summate for 1 minute.
So I think everybody's made some really great, valid points. I take Marion's point that I think, yes, as it currently is written, it is not workable as a policy motion, but this is a mini motion. And I would like us to kick it to policy committee and make it Neil Casey or whoever his successor may be, if it's not Neil Casey's problem to deal with.
Or whoever I may be, according
Hopefully
to
him, but anyway. Yeah, basically, I think the issue here is coordination. I think it's just, yes, councils do have powers, but it's getting them to use them to better coordinate things. I think that's the big issue. But I also thank Willie and some of the others who picked up the other issue that there's a reason I put pavements in here, not just roads, because accessibility matters, and we should be making sure that our pavements are properly accessible. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. Okay, thank you to everyone who contributed to that debate. We're going to move on to our next mini-motion, which is submitted by Duncan Dunlop and is on local power to local people. Duncan, do you want to take the stage, please? Is Duncan in the room? Oh, yes, Duncan.
Thank you. Good morning, conference. Localism is a core Liberal Democrat principle that is a real reason why I am a Liberal Democrat, but so is internationalism. But with internationalism, it is clear to me why and what that means to us as a party. And our peace and prosperity are based on us being more closely bonded together within international institutions. Our voters know that we stand for the EU. With localism, it is not so clear what this means beyond us having a really good local champion that will fight for potholes, education services, and local health services too. But without a clear policy, it is not clear what sets us apart from other parties. The SNP claim they deliver for local communities. The Tories claim they work for local people. The Labour claim they put communities first. The Greens claim they put power back to the communities and reform even Reform, claim they believe in local accountability. Our local authorities might be administratively effective units of government, but they do not enable proper civic participation. Nearly 50% of people now do not trust government. It is one of the core reasons we see a rise in populism. Our current forms of community governance, although well-intentioned, have too few powers to attract engagement in enough communities. Over 90% of our community councils do not attract enough interest to hold elections, although well done to the several Lib Dem members in Dunbar recently where there was a competitive election. That is rare. 20% are currently dormant with not enough attention for people to have local say. I found this recently where we could find no simple democratic local way we could enable our local grammar school to ban mobile phones. It doesn't work as it currently stands in every community. But the hope for real power located in communities comes from where we often look, Scandinavia. A key identifier for much of what I think we agree is the success of their societies and their happiness, and I think that does matter in these days, is that they give real power to their communities over services that affect them on a daily basis, whether that's primary health care, education, leisure, social care, housing and transport. If it affects them on a daily basis, they have a meaningful say. And indeed, Denmark recently reduced its number of municipalities, local authorities, from over 300 to just over 90. And they now regret that decision as it's reduced in lower levels of civic participation. I see the light, I'll be one more moment. And the reason I know there's an appetite for this in Scotland is that last year I was up against Mr Alexander and Labour's number one target.
You have 10 seconds left, Duncan.
And there I learnt and saw, as I engaged voters deeply in conversation, that they were enthused about power returning to their communities, but they wanted to know how we would do it. Not just that I would be a person that would deliver it, they wanted to know how we would deliver autonomy for them. So, localism and fiscal policy-making power in a community level is at the heart of liberal principles and delivers what voters want, autonomy for their communities. Let's give them what we want, it is what we stand for. Localism with meaning, localism with power, localism creating hope and happiness in our politics once again. Please, I commend this mini-motion to conference and look forward to hearing your contribution.
Thank you. Okay, so can I see hands up for those who want to speak on this, and we'll get a microphone to you. So we'll have Jackie, Paul, and then the two, Thomas and the other gentleman in the stripe there. So Jackie, first of all.
Jackie Bell, East Lothian, recently re-elected to Dunbar Community Council. It was our first election for 25 years. And I was first elected at the first election in 2000. Community councils were formed 50 years ago and replaced borough and parish councils as the lowest tier of local government. But they lack the powers of town and parish councils in England and Wales, who have professional clerks and can set a precept for local fiscal needs. Community councils can face issues in recruiting members as the public question their relevance. But they are statutory consultees on matters like planning. Some, despite small memberships, are being inundated with planning applications, like on green energy infrastructure. Some may handle very large sums of community benefit money from energy developers without qualified support. Pre-COVID, Scottish Government were looking at ideas for reform. It got nowhere. Community councillors across Scotland, including Lib Dems, are wanting reform, parity with England and Wales. But this mini-motion's proposals will need two radical changes in a range of functions to be managed by bodies in very small geographic areas as those proposed. Any reorganisation would be too disruptive for staff in the services impacted and those using them. The proposals will be extremely costly and unworkable. We want reform, but this motion doesn't give us the answers. We need to look further. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Paul, and then there were some hands up there.
With mention of Dunbar Community Council, I call Lib Dem Conference bingo. There we are. Thank you for submitting this, but this is one of the rare controversial times where I have to say that I can't see that this can pass, or we can't move this forwards. Simply put, this is dangerous. I mean, it doesn't have the proper scrutiny, it doesn't have the proper audit, and I think in some ways it overlooks the fact that there is very real thought and consideration that goes into local authorities making very strategic, larger decisions across the local authority on things like a social health care strategy, on schools, on how we have an education plan. And I think it's really important, and in some ways I think overlooks the excellent work of Lib Dem councillors and our need to get 150 rising and to get 150 councillors elected into our councils, because that's how we make them work and that's how we address the issues that Duncan raises, is by getting more Lib Dem councillors elected to offer proper scrutiny, proper vision, proper ideas. Unfortunately, adding an additional layer and giving control of, and I calculated in my local council, Tom, the chair of the community council, retired gentleman, wonderful gentleman, will have a £98 million budget. And I just don't see that we can replicate those type of scrutinies that we have in councils at a community council level. And therefore, this is one of the cases I'd say that this needs to be sent away with a no. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think hands up here, the gentleman in the striped jumper there, and then Thomas.
Thank you very much indeed. Nicholas Budgeon, Glasgow City Liberal Democrats. Conference, this motion appeals to me on a personal as well as on a philosophical level. Very sadly, I completely lack any trace of a Yorkshire accent, but my dearly beloved late grandfather was a Liberal councillor, a proud Liberal councillor for one of the few Liberal Lib Dem strongholds in West Yorkshire, the Greetland and Stainland ward. So I speak from his accounts of his time on Coaldale Council for the value of local government and the value of empowering local government. My grandfather, Grandpa Bob, as I affectionately call him, used the skills in public speaking and the contacts he gained on Coaldale Council to later campaign effectively as a former doctor himself against the downgrading of Coaldale Royal Infirmary. So let us be in absolutely no doubts whatsoever, very much building on the point made previously about the value of local councillors, not only of local councils, strong local government in that regard, in standing up for social justice. Conference, we know that power is far too centralised in Scotland
Can you draw your
and
remarks
across
to a close?
the UK,
Thanks.
so I'm very pleased to support this motion. I think it's a very liberal one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, and then Fraser, and then Odd.
I could make it here without the microphone. I used to have to. Apologies for speaking again, but when you come for 3.5 hours on ScotRail, then you feel you deserve to make good use of it. And this is a topic that I've thought about, particularly when I was a councillor. How many people are members of community councils here? Yeah, quite a lot of you. Well done, because you have no task at the moment, really. Is that fair? You're not given any powers, and so people tend not to join them. I know my own has not existed more than it has existed, simply because people don't understand it. So, briefly, I've always said we have to give community councils more power. I don't go as far as this motion, but they have to have more power because that increases democracy, because more people will think it's worth being on it. Thank you to those who do it, and some of them are great. I have attended many. Some of them are simply dreadful. Sorry. Small cliques that really only want to complain about everything. You know them. You've been there. So yes, we need to reform local representation, make it more democratic. The only way is to give our community councils, or something very like them, more powers.
Thank you. Fraser, and then Mel.
Yeah, so I'm a former community councillor many, many years ago. I like the intent of this, but I just don't think it's workable. I do agree with other speakers who have said, I do think we do need to give community councils more power. I think we need to be careful when we do that, that we are giving them more power and not just more responsibility and then failing to fund them. But I'm sure some of you remember during the wonderful time of COVID, there was a viral clip of a community council, I think it was the Hansforth Parish Council, which devolved into utter chaos during a meeting. And unfortunately, I have been in community council meetings like that. And actually, community council I sat on, yes, it didn't have much to do. In fact, the only thing that it really had to do was a lovely man, I think his name was Keith, who was a retired gentleman who basically all he did was find a reason to object to every single planning application just out of principle. So I do think we do want to be giving more power to community councils, but I just don't agree that this is the way to do this, so I'd ask you to vote against this one. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Mel?
Hi, Mel Sullivan. I'm a councillor in Aberdeenshire. Listening to this, I'm wondering if a compromise might be, I can never say this right, participatory budgeting. I don't know if you've heard of this. We do it in Aberdeenshire badly, but we're trying to get it better. So, for example, a town like Stonehaven, we have a certain amount of money to go towards leisure facilities. We then go to the community and say, you've got this money, would you prefer to have an upgrade to your swimming pool, or would you like a new tennis court? And then they choose. So that might be the way forward. The council still set the budget. They say what it needs to be spent on broadly, but then it's up to the communities to have the power to say, yeah, I mean, it can go as far as like grass cutting and hedge cutting, you know, you've got your landscape budget. Would you rather your verges cut 3 times a year rather than 2 times a year, or would you rather pruning on trees or something like that? So, thank you.
Thank you. Swimming pools or tennis courts, first world problems up in Stonehaven, clearly. Any more hands for this one? Okay, one here, here and here, and then we'll go to votes. Thanks.
Chris Young, Highlands, former community councillor in St Andrews. That was a natural community council at the time, fairly natural borders, worked quite well, lots of keen people. Other community councils in Glasgow, not so easy to tell where the boundaries should fall. I like the idea of linking things up with school catchment areas, or at least some other area, so at least your arbitrary boundaries align. But I think as a general principle, we should be looking at empowering community councils, but first look at borders, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. That in many cities, community councils aren't necessarily going to work unless they are tied to unless there's a real thought's gone into making the boundaries make sense.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Goodall, a councillor in Aberdeenshire like Mel. I love the idea of devolving power to community councils, but I have to be honest, in my experience as a councillor and an ex-community councillor as a chair with an Old Meldrum Community Council, giving power that's not exactly defined can be very dangerous to the councillor. Because believe me, at the moment, I have 2 main arguments with community councils, or they have with me, and what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And there's a lot of grief in some community councils. They really fight with each other. They take different positions. So you've got to define those powers, and you've got to be able to assist them in managing situations, assist them in managing their own community councils. But that has to be done. They've got to be defined exact, so there's no miscomprehension. Thank you.
Thank you. And one final speaker, and then I'll ask Duncan to submit.
Hi. I wasn't going to speak because I am also a Dunbar community councillor, and so I didn't want this to be entirely dominated by Dunbar residents. And I was also just re-elected with Jackie. I do think that the principle of empowering communities is very important. I think community councils at the moment are not fit for purpose, and just giving more power to the structure that currently exists would not be an effective way of empowering communities, which should be the end goal, not empowering community councils. I was thinking of participatory budgeting when this came up, and approaches like that can be really beneficial, and consultations that are not just seen as a way for district councils to push through the through the ideas that they've already come up with and they already want, but are ways for bringing new ideas from communities and putting them into practice. I would support this motion as it is a mini motion, and I think the benefits and the issues that it raises are good and crucial and key to Lib Dems, even if the fundamental policy suggestion is not yet at the point that I think it needs to be. But I think the principle of local power to local people should be where we're coming from, and is...
Thank you. Can you wrap up?
Yeah, and is the key alternative that Lib Dems can present to independence as something that can be presented to Scottish people in a Scottish election, rather than federalism that cannot be delivered in that context.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who contributed to that. If I can ask Duncan to come up to the stage just to summate for one minute.
Yep, thank you everyone who contributed to that. I'd say, I guess, a bit of a kaleidoscope of opinion there. This is a mini motion. For me, the real driver is I think we need to have change. Liberalism, a key thing is that we believe local people should make decisions. I'm not totally wedded to the high school area. I'm not certainly wedded to the community council or the people that currently sit in them. Dunbar residents obviously exempt from that in terms of they should have all the power and control. But we need something that makes us different and separate from other parties, and it's core of what we believe in. And I do therefore think that there was enough from what came back from the floor. Yes, I was saying this might be dangerous in one element, but through the guys, something needs to change. And I heard that from most contributors. This might not be the answer, but we do need to have a clearer position on this. Thank you to everyone for engaging in that.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who contributed to both debates. We'll now move to the indicative votes. So, as I say, this isn't binding. This will just decide whether conference is broadly in favour of this mini motion going to Policy Committee for further consideration. So we'll take the first mini motion, which was Fraser's, coordinating road and pavement resurfacing and utility works. If I can see those in favour. Okay, and those against? Okay, that is clearly carried, thank you. And then we'll move to local power to local people. That was Duncan Dunlop's motion that we've just discussed. Can I see those in favour of passing that to Policy Committee? Yeah, and those against? Ooh, that's a bit closer. Okay, we'll try that one again before we go to account. So can I see all those in favour? And against? Yeah, I think in favour just nudges that one. So that will go to Policy Committee as well. So thank you everyone, and I will now hand over to... Is it lunch now? Right, okay. Yeah. No? Who's next? SC3? Mel Sullivan. Who's chairing? You're Mel and Odd, and Jackie. Mel and Jackie are chairing.
Say where Les is from, because I don't know where he's from.
Sorry?
Les. Don't just say Les Star.
Just Les Star.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the last policy motion of the morning. It's policy motion 3, reverse the cuts in service for people with dementia and Alzheimer's and their families. So I'm going to call Les. Sorry.
Lorna Cammack to stand by.
Lorna Cammack to stand by, and Les Tarr to move the motion. Thank you. Do I switch it off? Do I switch this off?
Press it.
First of all, apologies if I'm keeping you from your lunch. Put my binoculars on. I appreciate that for a lot of people who are in the room that the subject of this motion is going to be deeply personal. Dementia is is one of the most underrated and under kind of funded areas in healthcare at the moment. And the reason for actually bringing this motion forward is that I came across three colleagues or three associates of myself. One was a nice chap who in Cullen, where I live, was running walking tours in the summer for tourists, taking them around a little picturesque area called Seatown that we live in, raising money for local community groups and local charities. He'd been doing it for a number of years, but unfortunately a diagnosis of Alzheimer's has taken the confidence away from him, and he's had to stop. Another acquaintance of mine got in contact with me recently after a long number of years, and in the conversations we were having, I discovered that both her parents had passed away with dementia, and her elder sibling had also gone down with it. And more recently, someone as a work colleague just before I retired was helping nurse their father through dementia and through supporting their mother through this. So looking at the sort of situation as you're getting curious, I discovered that there are so many things going on that are negative in this area. Dementia and the kind of related sort of conditions are not great vote winners. They don't lend themselves to great photo opportunities or nice little popularist sound bites. They certainly don't sort of attract attention from the governments, either north or south of the border. But looking at the facts that are out there from the agencies that are involved in that area, Alzheimer's Society reckon that 982,000 people suffer from a condition or have a condition related to dementia. Dementia UK, taking that further, reckon that 1 in 3 people with the condition are undiagnosed. So that's 300,000 people. And if you magnify the number of people with the condition by their families, the growth rate and the impact of it is quite exponential. And to have 300,000 people not knowing what's wrong with them and their families not having the satisfaction of having a diagnosis is quite difficult. And Alzheimer's Scotland, through their research, discovered that across Scotland, the Integrated Joint Health Boards are looking to make something like £154 million worth of cuts to older persons and care services in Scotland in the budgets in 2025, 2026. When the Scottish Government finally woke up and actually killed off the National Care Service plans that it had, it left a massive void in dementia services and in related care. The Care Reform Act Scotland that came on as an alternative to that really hasn't filled that void. And that people with a diagnosis of one of these conditions are really more than just a number, which they seem to be to the Scottish Government. They're just a statistic, but they're actually individuals. The National Care Service was just an example of another SNP vanity project that didn't go anywhere, yet cost the country money, £30 million in an estimate. As Liberal Democrats, we believe that people should have more control over their lives and their health. We believe that people with care needs should be able to get access to the services they need, where they need them and when they need them. And the where is very important, because to a sufferer of one of these terrible conditions, it's really familiar surroundings that help get through the day. So the call out really, and then the final point with Lib Dems is, we believe that everybody has a fundamental right to live their lives to the fullest, as independently as they can with dignity. And a call out to Mr. Swinney, that's really the only independence you need to be worried about at the moment, pal. Forget the flag and the nonsense. The reality of these conditions is that they're progressive, there is no cure. There are treatments that can help slow down that progression. And there are strategies that we've put in place that allow families and allow patients to know that they've got some kind of secure plan in front of them. But that void that was left by the National Care Service needs to be filled. The first thing that needs to happen, it really is the Scottish Government needs to get off its backside and realise it needs to come up with that minimum care standard it's been talking about for 12 or 14 years. Alzheimer's Scotland has put forward a proposal for a Dementia Care Pathways Guarantee, which is a strategy that takes someone through the various stages of one of these conditions. and it allows them to ensure that they know what's going to happen to them as they go through this kind of plan. They get the support that's needed to get quality time with their relatives and their families. And that the families themselves and the carers involved get support and respite care to help them through this, because it's as much of a weight on them as it is for anybody else. So the call from the motion to the Scottish Government is in 3 ways. One is to immediately ring-fence funding for the IJBs, to reverse these cuts that are planned for the 2025-2026 budgets, and to go for multi-year funding proposals rather than the annual bun fight. The second call is to get that national care standard in place. And the third call is to work with the support organisations and the charities to come up with guaranteed pathways, such as Alzheimer's Scotland are proposing. To the UK Government, the call is quite simple. Give us a rebate for the organisations and the companies that are involved in medical research and support for people with one of these conditions, so they can better establish treatment plans and can better establish the research into the root causes. They're never going to get a cure. But it's important that they don't waste money paying back to the government, something that's just a waste of time tax. And to both governments, really, it's a case of spend more money on this. 1 in 3 people suffering from a diagnosis that they don't know about. These conditions are the single biggest killer in Scotland and in the UK for health-related deaths. And of course, I can hear Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in the background, and somewhere in the back of my mind saying, oh, but wait a minute though, we inherited that £21 billion black hole. Well, since the Labour government was elected last year, we've discovered another black hole, and it's where the Labour government's compassion should be for people that need greatest need and vulnerabilities. So the conditions mostly impact the older generation, but not exclusively. But these are generations that have paid their taxes, paid the national insurance, and now when they're actually in need from society are being failed. A very wise old Liberal once wrote in a book, human beings huddling together in fear of being left alone, baffled by the prison of their own sensations, long for some support, for some assurance that they are of importance and that their life has meaning. And society and the state its servant must help to fulfil those yearnings. That was written back in 1964, but it's highly relevant today.
Could you bring your remarks to a close, please?
So, Conference, my call really today is that the governments are not listening, but we as Liberal Democrats have a reputation as listeners and people who will fight. So I would call upon Conference to agree with this motion and to take up the cause and to be the voice for people with one of these conditions and their families, so they don't go unseen, unheard or unrecognised as individuals. Conference, I ask you to support the motion.
Okay, thank you, Les.
Can I call Lee Marley to stand by and call Lorna Cammack of Rutherglen and South Lanarkshire to speak for the motion?
Conference. This is something that's quite important to me. But before I begin on the personal story, there is a care home in the south side of Glasgow who has experimented with teaching a language to people with dementia. And they put on a picture of them receiving their graduation scroll. And they found that that was a big help. So the rest of what I'm going to say is very positive. I'll get rid of this thing first, because music in any shape and form is great for people with dementia. I got that in a shop in Addison instead of fireworks. Margaret is my sister-in-law, and she is in Newcastle, and she's got dementia increasing. She's in a lovely home called Sovereign Lodge, and it now has another name added, Mariposa. The Spanish speakers will recognise it's butterfly minds. So I went in to see Margaret. It's a very comfortable place, and the back, there's a garden in front, garden behind. And all the time in my mind, I had this little verse. I've got it here because I want to get it right. Here we are. This is something that was written by an American professor who was also an elder in her church. And it goes like this. When memory fades, I find this quite emotional. When memory fades and recognition falters, when eyes we love grow dim and minds confused, speak to our souls of love that never alters. Speak to our hearts by pain and fear abused. O God of life and healing peace, empower us with patient courage by your grace infused. And that goes to the tune that's quite well known, the anthem of Finland. When memory fades and recognition falters. Most of you will know that. So what am I doing? Supporting this motion?
Thank you, Lorna. Could Jackie Bell stand by, please? And Lee Marley of Ayrshire and Arran come and speak for the motion. He's a first-time conference speaker.
Good morning, everyone. This is my first speech at a Liberal Democrat conference. When I was asked to participate, I initially thought it would actually be really good practice, as I'm getting married next week, and that would be my second speech I'll be doing. I am a social care worker. I have been for 3 years. I have worked over a dozen one-to-one supports in no care homes. I go into their house and I support them there. But unfortunately, I see a growing trend amongst my colleagues that I speak with, which is not unique to me or even the charity that I do work for. Many I care for, and many colleagues I have would agree with what Les Tarr's motion is proposing, as individuals, as Les Tarr rightfully said, need to be treated with the dignity and respect that is brought with being a carer to the individuals, so that they can live an independent and full of a life as possible. Like many others, it's my duty to keep that maintained, and when I am caring for them, I will take them shopping, karaoke, social supports, their appointments, and I will take them to any parks that they want to go to, and I will provide personal care for their hygiene. I'm proud of my work, and so is many of my colleagues. The lingering shadow of social care is cuts. There's a lack of incentive to join, and there's not enough people that are staffing. There's not enough staff to work at the charities, and they're leaving at very alarming rates. It's underfunded, and the recent decisions have came to effect, which not has just caused redundancy, it's directly cut services of 2 individuals that I will bring up. One, a young man with Down syndrome, had a 12-hour service cut down to 8 hours per day. This is not just 4 hours of less pay for the carer. This is 4 hours where he does not have a social support. After he's had his dinner, they leave, and he is by himself. He'll watch TV, But before that, he would have them for the rest of the night where he had someone to talk to. He is not allowed to leave his house after the carer has left. Secondly, we have a young woman that was in the news recently in the Daily Record, a Lisa McMillan. Her support was taken off where she no longer had transport nor a support for her primary school. For a month, the East Ayrshire Council had kept this decision until public outcry was thankfully able to create a U-turn for this decision, and now she does have transport, where she now attends primary school. The reason I bring these up is what Leicester is proposing with dementia and Alzheimer's is the same thing that is happening with them. People are being treated as a number that is costly, not as a person that requires support, that needs support, but just as another paycheck.
Could you bring your remarks to a close, please?
Yes, sir. We should look after the most vulnerable in our society, especially those with dementia and Alzheimer's. Many have been abandoned by Scotland and its Parliament. And as Leicester has correctly pointed out, the void needs to be filled, and this void has had a direct effect with those with dementia. I support Leicester's motion to fill this void. We should fight for a minimum care standard, not just because it is liberal, but because it is just.
Thank you. Apologies to the other people who put cards in. We do not have time to take you. So I'm going to call on Jackie Bell to make the motion. Thank you.
Conference. The impacts of a dementia diagnosis are wide-ranging, not just for the person with dementia, but also on their families and carers in addition. In addition to cognitive change, dementia brings functional and sensory change that affects how those with it are able to engage and manage in their own environment. It can put an emotional toll on the individual and their carer. It can be compounded by the lack of awareness and stigmatisation of the condition in the general community. At present, around 850,000 people in the UK have a dementia diagnosis. Above that is the unknown number who are undiagnosed, compounded by long waiting lists, in some places over a year, for a diagnostic assessment. In this room, most people will know or have known someone with dementia. Personally, my mum, gran, aunt, and a number of friends. Some of us will develop it ourselves. We heard from Lorna. Scotland has an ageing population. In East Lothian alone, there is a prediction of a 93% increase in over 75s over the next decade. Thus, the number of those with dementia and needing services will increase. At the same time, IJBs are needing to make funding savings. In East Lothian, 3 years of work on planning services for older people that ended this year, but it's difficult to put into place due to the lack of funding. In fact, last year, the IJB closed 2 council care homes and 2 community hospitals, leading to increased delayed discharge and reduced options for respite and assessment beds. There is good work around the country. Most of it's provided by the third sector. Alzheimer's Scotland provides essential post-diagnostic support. East Lothian's Carers of East Lothian gives valuable support to carers, but the third sector is vulnerable to funding cuts. The 9 East Lothian day centres, including Dunbar, where I'm a trustee, are locked into a 6-year funding deal. With increased running costs, we compete with other charities for extra funds. At the same time, funding for research into dementia is under threat. Stirling University's Iris Murdoch Centre is a centre of excellence. The staff there and in medical research need to be confident of continued funding. Conference. As its known needs will increase, it's urgent that there is investment rather than cuts to services for those with dementia and their carers. There is a struggle for some to receive services now with the postcode lottery. It will intensify over the years to come. Conference. We are sitting on a demographic time bomb. We need to plan ahead to ensure right care in the right place at the right time. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll go to the vote. Please remember you need to be seated to vote, and make sure you hold the actual orange bitty, not your other bitty, up. So I'll wait for Jackie to sit down. All those in favour of the motion? Thank you. All those against the motion? That looks unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes the morning session. Go have fun at the fringes.
We'll now move to the fringes. I want to thank first-time speaker Lee Manley, but also acknowledge our first-time chair, Mel Sullivan.